Hey everybody, this is Dark Guardsman, and welcome to sort of a news update and demo at the same exact time. So when it comes to news, not much really has been going on. Assembly line conveyor belts have been progressing as expected. You saw probably the demo already. Since the demo, there has been some improvement with how everything's working. There's also been some bugs, of course, you can tell from, just looking at it. Around the renders have been being developed and worked on it. Yeah, just as I start recording, we get the nice little bug of assembly line. Not the best thing I want to be showing off right now, but we're going to push past this, and I'm just going to show off what we've got and what's going forward. Ignore this, I'll get to that in a bit and explain why there's a big pile of fire and lava over there. Anyways, let's go over here and place down some pipes here. So from this is all the demo, you already recognize the pipes, or actually that's the wrong one. This is the one we want. It's a pity that the textures aren't showing up because I did a really nice job on some of the textures. I will probably make another video after this just to show those off. But the pipes themselves have progressed. The renders are still roughly about the same. I don't remember the exact state I left off the demo video as I made it actually several days ago. And then only uploaded it here yesterday and then got to working on a lot of new features. So we've got, of course, the straight section pipes. The issue with not being able to remove the top tube and having an update has been fixed. Several of the other buttons have been fixed, GUI packets have been cleaned up, slot IDs, everything else have been improved. We now have belt turns, so those have been implemented if I can get the angle just right. Not the most straightforward thing, I'm still working on usability and rotation and everything else. But now this means you can now set up all kinds of curves and turns. There is both a left and right hand one. The right hand one is not 100% finished yet. It has been set up, so it will actually place and everything, but it has no top renders. It took me about 2 hours just to do the frame edges on these for all 8 directions, and then it took another 2 hours to get the tops all set up. There's a live stream up on Twitch you guys can catch. I am currently trying to export it to YouTube, but it's not wanting to export. We'll solve that a bit later. There's still 2 more types that need to be implemented, actually if not more. There's the junction, which will allow 2 pipes to be merged together and will pretty much work as if these 2 were connected together and you'd merge them into a single output. It will also allow you to do other things as well with some customization on inputs and outputs, and there will be an intersection that will allow you to do the same exact thing, except the intersection will have 4 connections where the junction will only have 3 connections. So it'll have 2 inputs and 1 output, or you can kind of customize it and do some sorting with it to have 2 outputs, 1 input, and everything else. Sorting has not been added yet, but we'll get to that eventually. This is kind of in its infancy, and it's, to be honest, the first time I've actually released a pipe-like mod to the public. I know I've done things like fluid pipes. Fluid pipes are easy. Wires are also kind of pipe-like, and they're not too hard to do. Items are a bit trickier just because you want to make them look nice and function at the same time. If we were going purely for functionality, that wouldn't have been much of an issue. We would be able to get that right off the back and got it functioning within maybe a couple hours. But once you add visuals into these and you go, okay, I'm going to make stuff actually render and look nice, then you add a whole bunch of levels because you have to make the textures look nice. You got to do a whole bunch of extra rendering functions, like being able to remove this stuff off here, which, by the way, you can do the same thing. You can remove the top off this one as well. Get that nice transparent glass. That glass is not a standard feature that you can just do with a model. You have to actually set up an extra code for that. And of course, there's an ISBR, which allows you, if we go from a distance and back up, will allow that to continue rendering at pretty much any distance, unlike normal tiles. Of course, the items will stop rendering after a certain distance, but that's expected. You couldn't see those even on a 4K monitor from distance. Anyways, let's get into the next few things. The lava lake is there because we were doing a live stream yesterday testing ICBM Classic on our servers, working on things like the ships, force fields, various other things. And we were testing off explosives because we were bored and it was near the end of the day and everything, so we set off a couple Redmatters, antimatters. We basically nuked a village out of existence. And right near the end, Doppelgangers decided to pull an in the name of science and set off 25 exothermic explosions. And luckily he did, because he caught a rather nasty bug that was hidden in the code that nobody had noticed for a while. And this had to do with how fire blocks were placed. Most of the other explosives have already been fixed for this a long time ago. They must have been noticed prior to that and caught. But when you place fire blocks, you place too many of them, and you also place them where they're not supposed to be. This is the more important thing. If you place them, like, say, in the air, they will go to delete themselves. Now, if you place too many of them, and you place them in the air, they will, when they go to delete themselves, they'll tick their neighbors to also activate, which will then tick their neighbors to also activate as well. So if you have a ton of fire blocks all destroying themselves at the same time, they trigger a stack overflow in which all of them try to set themselves to error and then notify each other. It's more of the notification that is the problem. This is actually a vanilla bug that exists inside Minecraft. It can be triggered by just about anything, and I've patched it out of I don't know how many different mods. Greg Tech had a huge problem with their ores client side with this issue that I patched here last year for somebody's server. I can't remember. I think it was Shadow's chapter server. But the Fireblocks have the same problem. If a lot of these try to update and remove, they will crash a server. They'll take it down. And for those who don't know what a Stack Overflow is, it's essentially you have a segment of memory that a method can use. And if you use too much of that memory, you run out of it and then the game crashes. It can happen with pretty much any language, any operating system in existence. And it really just comes down to, it's basically an infinite loop without being an infinite loop. So a normal infinite loop, you're calling yourself over and over and over again, or you're stuck in a loop over and over again. With this bug, you're essentially notifying neighbor over and over again, which is notifying its neighbor and so on, because then you get a whole entire field of fire blocks that are all trying to delete themselves. Very easy fix, just ask the fire block if it should be there. And it was a good, easy fix, and that's been solved. Redmatter has got some improvements. So a lot of people have been complaining that Redmatter is basically pathetic, and let's go ahead and set the time today here. So I do listen to this. I do actually pay attention to some forum threads occasionally, and I do actually notice, and to be honest, I've noticed a lot of this. A lot of these explosives some of them are underwhelming, some of them are too powerful. Antimatter is a really powerful explosive, and unfortunately is what everything is scaled against. So when somebody goes and they see the red matter and they go, okay, that takes an antimatter and all these nether stars. By the way, the nether star recipe is a temporary recipe. It exists purely because atomic science was never updated. For those who keep looking at it like, why is it nether stars? It's because we don't have strange matter. You can't exactly craft this out of strange matter if you don't have strange matter. The same thing goes for antimatter. Nether stars are just there temporarily. And for those who don't like the recipe, it is really easy to balance it. Voltage Engine comes with a built-in recipe change system that's very similar to our recipe tweaks. You can use JSON to edit all these recipes if you want to. I'll probably make a guide eventually extracting how to do that. But there's a couple more things with Redmatter. So Redmatter has been scaled up. It's now twice the size. It went from 35 radius to 70. This means it'll act on a much larger area. I have not fixed all the problems with fluid blocks yet. That is something I am currently in the process of fixing right before I was making this video. It's going to take a while to fix because effectively what I need to do is I need to actually detect for the water, path the entire water section, and suck that water into the black hole before I touch any other blocks. That way it's removed, it's out of the way. The alternative is I detect for all blocks around the water block, and then make sure if I remove that block, I remove the water with it. But let's go ahead and set this off, and I'll show a few of the other things here. The gravitational pull has been increased on this, so this will now suck blocks in a lot quicker, a lot faster, and you won't have that problem where entities will hover below it. It also is really fun watching squid get sucked in here. The speed hasn't really been adjusted much, at least not in the current iteration. It has been adjusted in past iterations to increase how many blocks it can pull in, how fast it can do various other things and stuff like that. But the most notable thing, if any of you are paying attention, I added the accretion disk back. The code was there. It was not missing, there was nothing wrong with it, it was just sitting in there and just nobody was really doing anything with it. Unfortunately, it looks like it may need some work left, because if you can see, you can sit here and look at it, and ignoring the fact that the audio is just absolutely atrocious. Let's go ahead and fix that really quick so I can continue talking. Just turn it off. So the disk itself does need a bit more work. You can see the transparency in it, and that's not supposed to happen. That more than likely was supposed to be alpha'd. And to be honest, this is probably why it was turned off. It just no longer looks correct. There's a bit of curving on the corners here, and I'm not quite sure what's up with that. I suspect I probably need to go in through with GIMP or some other tool and just clean this entire texture up. But it's there. So for those who really liked it, and when you're at a distance, it really doesn't look bad either. It's only when you get really close to it. And if you're close to it, you're more worried about dying than you are to see that thing. But it's, for those who've been asking for it back, it's there. I am probably going to scale the accretion disk up with the red matter, because you notice how big the actual hole itself is, or the spear, compared to the accretion disk. It should be about half the size, and the accretion disk should be at least twice the size, in other words. So I'm going to have that scale up, because right now the hole, or the spear, will scale up as the red matter gets bigger. So as you get more and more blocks sucked into it, it grows larger and larger and larger. And of course, if you have two or more of these all next to each other, it will grow bigger and bigger. So if we set a couple of these off here, let's just put two of these next to each other. So you notice how it snapped really big and now the accretion disk is no longer there. That's another issue that will be worked on and fixed over time. But that's been about it. There's a few other minor fixes I've been working on. Just things like fixing GUI errors, fixing render problems. And as you notice, I have to fix these. The main issue, by the way, for those who are asking why it's causing this, I know exactly in the code where this is causing the problem. In our item render, we detect to check to see if it should render as an item or a block. And this is in order to fix problems with, if we can come over and find ICBM here, the actual ICBM. So these render as blocks. These use the same exact render code as our item. They're all based on JSON-based rendering in 1.7.10, which 1.7.10 does not have built-in JSON, so this is 100% custom. So these use the same render code, but they needed to detect without being told, should I render as a block or should I render as an item? And the code that tells it to do that is failing. And it doesn't fail every single time, but it does cause problems. Like, for example, the FOS station is, I don't know what it's trying to render as. I think it's trying to render as a glass block of some kind, because you see the corner edge, that's not what the texture looks like. So that is definitely another block texture. It's the same problem that is happening with a few other things. It's probably causing some problems here. It doesn't seem to be breaking the guns, but it is breaking other things. And keep in mind, like, all of this uses the same codes. This is all JSON-based rendering. Most of the items in ICBM are JSON-based rendering now. And some of the blocks are. Like, these block... Actually, that one's JSON-based rendering. That one's not. These ones have yet to be updated either. But most of them are getting there. And we're getting to the point where it's almost 100% JSON. And for those who like to make resource packs and everything else, this is great news for you guys, because this means you can customize pretty much everything. Although I am unsure if the resource pack actually will override it. So you probably have to use the config JSON folder to override resources, but that's not a huge problem, because most of the time I can see people actually modifying this. They're going to be modifying it for custom mod packs rather than just a pure resource pack. But if you guys who work on resource packs discover that doesn't working, I'll try to fix it and rectify and make it work properly. Of course, you can still change the textures and you can still change the models. Keep in mind, though, the model needs to match the same format, because I don't think all the code is set up to just switch between model types randomly. But yeah, that's been about it for the news and demo there. The main demo was just to show off the accretion disk there and a few of the other different behavior logic. I'll probably make more of these videos here later, just over the individuals. Oh, and one more thing I forgot. I don't think I talked about MFS and all the changes going to happen to it. So MFS is still being worked on. I'm still balancing it out. I'm still working on making it easy to use. And I'll probably just make a video talking about it by itself, of all the planned changes and additions and everything else. There is a possibility. We were originally talking about making a second version of MFS that was a multi-block. I am considering just making that part of the same mod. So instead of having a classic version of MFS and then another version, which we won't ever call the classic version classic, it'll just be MFS, and the other one will just be some kind of other mod that has the same name of force field. But the ideal is that we can now merge these two together and just continue forward, because it fits the same theme and style and doesn't ruin it like what happened with ICBM and ICBM Classic, where you have two completely different design styles. With MFS, we can kind of get around that and end up making a little bit more and everything else. But that'll be a video on its own where I'll end up having to talk about that, everything else. So I'll see you guys later.